Dude, Tucker Carlson, let's finish this off. We only had like 30 minutes remaining on this. Yesterday, I covered most of the conversation. Obviously, Tucker Carlson himself. I know. It's 4:44. Okay, we have 45 more minutes of politics before I move on to fun stuff. I've already region locked myself. Don't you fucking worry about a thing, baby. Okay, it ain't no thing but a chicken wang. We are doing it. I'm fucking region locked. Okay, I'm hour locked. I'm gatekeeping. I'm girl bossing. I'm doing all of those things. Okay. So here, it is already 125 speeded. What I was saying is yesterday when we watched this for the first time, I was shocked. I was shocked at how pornographic it was. I was shocked that Tucker Carlson, like Vladimir Putin, basically said, "What that mouth do?" And Tucker Carlson was like, "Let me tell you, I'm hungry. Okay, I'm hungry for more." I mean, he very clearly like shitted on him to his face. He spent like 30 minutes being like, Ukraine is Russia, and also that's the reason why I invaded Ukraine, and not because of NATO. Shut the fuck up. I love the idea of Ukraine being Russia. It actually is Russia. Here's where it begins, history. He basically vindicated a lot of the liberal posturing. He's a classic ultra nationalist. He is a classic ultra nationalist guy who is engaging in an irredentist campaign. That's it. There's no other way to look at it. It's it. Yeah, Tucker Carlson. Yeah, there's a lot of funny meme that came of it. Tucker Carlson and Ukraine seems like a yikes for me, buddy. First of all, he did not say that. Tucker Carlson did not say, and Ukraine seems like a yikes for me, buddy. But here's what Vladimir Putin did, uninterrupted. My Russian but not hog mother spent like 2 hours today explaining to me in exactly the same level of deep Russian history lore how actually Ukraine is in fact not Russian. I just don't understand what that has to do with anything. It's the same bullshit that fucking Israel tries to claim. Okay? It's bullshit. It doesn't fucking work that way. There are obvious differences. But like that's just, you're making a ridiculous living room blood and soil ass argument, and it's also not correct anyway. Okay, like that's why I said there are differences. You said, what about Crimea? I don't know if you're asking legitimately because you like genuinely try to understand and make sense of it, or if you think it's like a good opportunity to be like, Hassan, hypocritical much. Like there's a difference there. Okay, for example, not to relitigate this over and over again, but here I'll use the exact same fucking argument. And same for Taiwan. Exactly. Great. What about Taiwan? Okay. What about Taiwan? Like, Taiwanese people, if they want to have some semblance of autonomy away from China, they have every right to do so. Okay? But Taiwanese independence, while it is certainly popular, especially amongst younger people, is still not the overwhelming majority position. It is the secondary overwhelming majority position. The overwhelming majority position currently is don't rock the fucking boat. This is an important goddamn trade partner. Okay? And why do they feel that way? Well, it's not because China is awesome or it's awesome to them. They feel that way not because of the blood and soil argument either. They feel that way because they don't want they don't want the smoke. They don't want Taiwan to turn into Ukraine, for example. Okay? That's it. America has some different opinions, but regardless. So the point is, regardless of all of that shit, when we're talking about Russia in particular, I think my assessment after listening to what Vladimir Putin had to say, which for the record, he did have a lot of moments of clarity, which I think looks really fucking bad for the Western world in general, because it just looks good for him. Like, they rarely talked about Ukraine. They rarely talked about his fucking L's. Tucker Carlson literally let him, okay? Tucker Carlson literally let him fucking run train, okay? Like, that's crazy. That's a huge fucking L. And he hit a lot of the high notes in the process that play really well to a conservative audience. He also did Nazi apology a little bit too, but not even talking about the historical memes here. I'm talking specifically about like, I'm talking specifically about like, you know, America and the SWIFT system, for example, and how the SWIFT system has, and it being weaponized against Russia, has made other people recognize that like maybe America can like implement sanctions on them as well, which will cause them to get off the dollar. I don't even think that that is 100% real. I think that's a real fear that a lot of people have, a lot of nations have, of course. But it's, you know, nobody's moving away. Come on, let's be for fucking real for a second. It's 80% of the entire global economy running on the dollar. But yeah, the BRICS system is not like a valid competitor, in my opinion, and I don't think any serious economist would see it as such. But that plays well to a Western audience of like both hogs and even maybe people who are on the left who have a different opinion, like the BRICS riders on the left, right? There's some of them out there. Richard Wolff does? Yeah, well, I trust Yanis Varoufakis more than I trust Richard Wolff when it comes to international currency conversations and things beyond like a pretty good assessment on Marxist perspectives. Marxist history. Is a great communicator. But I think Yanis Varoufakis is probably a little bit better at making these assessments. Anyway, so as I was saying, this was a major dub for Vladimir Putin. Okay, and I think that it could have only been done if you had someone as hungry as Tucker Carlson for like clout. There were funny moments where he like defended China and he basically forced Tucker to concede in defending China. That's true, but I feel like he also played up the historical claims to Ukraine too much compared to other issues. Even pro-Russians, I feel, understand that this stupid historical claims forming part of the foundation of his invasion look terrible. Yeah, for sure. I think that I think that there are definitely a lot of boomers, I'm sure, in Russia that love the notion of like restoring the glory of the USSR, not for communism, obviously, but simply for like the idea of being a global hegemonic power again in a multipolar world and stuff like that. And those guys maybe love the historic claims laid to Ukraine, but it's just so bad. It's just such a dumb fucking thing to do. It is so dumb to do. And you are absolutely going to push away more people. Okay? However, outside of his really faulty justifications for why he had to have invaded Ukraine and then rarely ever talking about it after that, I think that there were a lot of moments that looked really bad or looked really good for him from a propaganda purpose. Because as I've said this before, America is bad, right? So he could just sit there, and if he never talks about what Russia is doing and only talks about what America is doing, he can make a coherent argument about how Russia is small bean, actually, even if it's not the case, especially as it pertains to him invading Ukraine. Okay? But he can always turn around and talk about the hypocrisy of the United States of America on every single issue, because it's true. It is. America is bad. We are very hypocritical. So I think he did a decent job in that front of shifting the conversation completely away from all of his massive failures, all of the violent actions, but also even like massive failures from the perspective of like being pro-Russia, right? It's just not, it was a big dub for Vladimir Putin, not a very good moment for, I don't know, America lovers who want to not be captivated by Vladimir Putin, or not a good moment for people who want to continue funding the Ukrainian defense.
Give everything needed for us to return.
He has talked about the historic claims before Ukraine's offensive failed. No, he has. You're wrong about that.
And what was lost during the clashes with
I think
Russia.
he did.
And we agreed with this proposal. Look, his statement has been published. He said it publicly. Can they return to this or not? The question is, do they want it or not? Further on, President of Ukraine issued a decree prohibiting negotiations with us. Let him cancel that decree, and that's it. We have never refused negotiations, indeed. We hear all the time, is Russia ready? Yes, we have not refused. It was them who publicly refused. Well, let him cancel his decree and enter into negotiations. We have never refused. And the fact that they obeyed the demand or persuasion of Mr. Johnson, the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, seems ridiculous and very sad to me. Because, as Mr. Arakamiya put it, we could have stopped those hostilities with war a year and a half ago already. But the British persuaded us and we refused this.
Like, when I say this, I'm not the one who's invading Ukraine. It makes sense if someone who's not directly involved and maybe the only responsible party for the invasion of Ukraine to make this argument, to be like, hey, kind of fucked up if true that, the peace talks fell apart after Boris Johnson offered unconditional support that maybe the Western world was inevitably going to revoke. Okay. Not great. Yeah, me saying that from America as a outsider looking at the situation is understandable. Vladimir Putin saying that is insane. It's like, dude, you are the responsible party. You invaded Ukraine. What do you mean? Like, oh, wow, they're really continuing the fucking war that I'm waging? Like, what? It makes no sense.
Where is Mr. Johnson now? And the war continues.
That's a good question. Where do you think he is, and why did he do that?
Hell knows. I don't understand it myself. There was a general starting point. For some reason, everyone had the illusion that Russia could be defeated on the battlefield. Because of arrogance, because of a pure heart, but not because of a great mind.
You've described the connection between Russia and Ukraine. You've described Russia itself a couple of times as orthodox. That's central to your understanding of Russia. You said you're orthodox. What does that mean for you? You're a Christian leader by your own description. So what effect does that have on you?
Okay, bro.
Oh,
He's so, god damn, dude. The glaze machine. He's like, guac. Please, sir, you're a Christian leader, right? Come on. What does that mean, how Christian you are? Can we talk about... This motherfucker doesn't give a shit. I don't think... Does Vladimir Putin give a fuck about, actual religion? I don't care. I don't think he cares.
as I already mentioned, in 988, Prince Vladimir himself was baptized following the example of his grandmother, Princess Olga. And then he baptized his squad, and then, gradually, over the course of several years, he baptized all the Rus. It was a lengthy process, from pagans to Christians. It took many years. But in the end, this orthodoxy, Eastern Christianity, deeply rooted itself in the consciousness of the Russian people. When Russia expanded and absorbed other nations who profess Islam, Buddhism, and Judaism, Russia has always been very loyal to those people who profess other religions. This is her.
I'm sorry. I do not believe, even for a brief moment, this is like Recep Tayyip Erdogan talking about how fucking Muslim he is, okay? I do not believe that even for a single fraction of a motherfucking second that neither Putin nor Erdogan ever give a fuck about the top of the hour ad break. They're literally multi-billionaires. They can fucking buy $5 a month subscriptions all day, every day. If they're in Russia, you don't even get served an ad. If you're not Vladimir Putin, if you're not Recep Tayyip Erdogan, however, you are going to see an ad at the top of the hour. It's true. So unless there is unless Vladimir Putin's in here right now gifting subs, you're cooked. Okay? Here's a 3-minute ad break now. Huh. You can't make the argument Putin is the only one who can stop the war just because he invaded. If you would see every conflict in the world like that, you would never have any peace in the region. Why? What are you talking about? I say the same thing about fucking Israel. The fuck do you mean? Not only about Israel, but I also say America has a lot that they could do. No, I think Vladimir Putin absolutely could stop invading Russia. I'm pretty sure. Okay. Or there's invading Russia, sorry, Ukraine. Fuck, he's got me. I'm a Putinist. I'm a Duganist. Fuck! They caught me. They caught me. I believe Ukraine is Russian. Fuck! I had a Brandon moment. I had a Brandon moment. You have an oligarch sugar daddy? I get gifted from the oligarch daddy. We are not the same. I'm the oligarch sugar daddy to my oligarch daddy, okay? You make a lot of comments regarding this interview, like, what do you mean you are the one invading, etc.? I think I already described it to you. Like, his reasoning, bro, in the first 35 minutes, he completely eliminates. One, I already disagree with him about invading Ukraine. I think that was a major fucking problem. I think it is a major fucking problem. Okay, both on morality grounds, but also even from a pragmatic perspective, if I were to assume the role of like being Vladimir Putin's advisor or some shit, okay? It was a massive mistake. Don't say, is it a mistake though? Yes, it is. People try to fucking be like, oh, dude, 13,000 people died in Donbass. Like, that was Ukraine's doing. And it's like, it literally, I don't agree with that at all, because how many hundreds of thousands of people have fucking died now? Was that worth it? He already had, like, people act like this is a good thing. If your goal is to stop the bleeding, stop the hemorrhaging, stop and defend Donetsk. Okay. Then did he do that? Did he save Russian lives by doing that? No. The perspective of people that are like Russian, like open-minded to Russia, has shifted dramatically now that they're under now that they're fucking living in rubble or living in shit or completely annexed by Russia. Like, that's why I always stress the difference between Crimea and the rest of this operation, okay? Both from the way that Ukraine has dealt with the invasion versus what they did after Crimea, shutting off the waterways into Crimea. Very different than trying to fight back physically and gain every territory back, because that is, like, understandably, those are where, like, those are where millions of Ukrainians lived. Talking talking specifically about the reasons as to why he invaded Ukraine, and saying that it is irredentist action, making blood and soil arguments to a goddamn T, is just straight up ultra nationalist, right wing nonsense. Okay? It is a strategic flub. It is not good pragmatically. The cost of it is far too great. Territorial disputes would have already made it so that the Western world do not follow through on bringing in Ukraine into NATO. Okay? But he showed that the Russian military is not as mighty as he claimed it was. And I think they just absolutely fucking flubbed big time.
Strength. This is absolutely clear. And the fact is that the main postulates, main values are very similar, not to say the same, in all world religions I've just mentioned, and which are the traditional religions of the Russian Federation, Russia. By the way, Russian authorities were always very careful about the culture and religion of those people who came into the Russian Empire. This, in my opinion, forms the basis of both security and stability of the Russian statehood. All the peoples inhabiting Russia basically consider it their motherhood. If, say, people move over to you or to Europe from Latin America, an even clearer and more understandable example, people come, but yet they have come to you or to European countries from their historical homeland. And people who profess different religions in Russia consider Russia their motherland. They have no other motherland. We are together.
By the way, it's wild to say that Russia, notoriously good for other religions, they're basically the godfather of anti-Semitism. Like, they literally, you might say they invented anti-Semitism. Or if you don't believe that they invented anti-Semitism, you might say they perfected it. Okay? Before America? What do you mean before America? Bitch, what was America? We are talking about the book. Okay? The book on anti-Semitism.
This is one big family, and our traditional values are very similar. I've just mentioned one big family, but everyone has her own family. And this is the basis of our society. And if we say that the motherland and the family are specifically connected with each other, it is indeed the case, since it is impossible to ensure a normal future for our children and our families unless we ensure a normal, sustainable future for the entire country, for the motherland. That is why patriotic sentiment is...
Bro, why is he not talking about Alaska? I know someone in the chat just brought that up too. Like, if he's talking about, like, this is Russia, that's Russia, does he have the same smoke for Alaska, bro? I'm just saying, fuck it, two-front war. YOLO. Think about it. Wasn't the book on anti-Semitism written by a failed Austrian artist? No, there's an earlier one. Okay, that one just improved upon the earlier work. Okay, you're thinking Mein Kampf. I'm thinking go back further in the past to Protocols. Why is he so arrogant? We got sanctions on him.
so strong in Russia.
But can I say that the one way in which the religions are different is that Christianity is specifically a nonviolent religion. Jesus says, turn the other cheek, don't kill. How can a leader who has to kill?
Didn't the Roman Empire do that before the Russians? Okay, fair. I mean, Christians have always done it. But that's why I said, like, the Christians have been the #1 anti-Semites. If we're looking at, like, actual percentages, it doesn't come close, which is why I always laugh when people are like, Islam is the most anti-Semitic. Like, shut the fuck up, bitch. What are you talking about? Islam is like catching up, if anything. Okay, but it can't come near. But if there is like there's an era of like peak anti-Semitism before, obviously, the Holocaust, I would say, you know, pre-USSR Russia, pretty fucking bad. And then the rest of it is also Christians across the board.
Of any country. How can a leader be a Christian? How do you reconcile that to yourself?
It is very easy. When it comes to protecting oneself and one's family, one's homeland, we won't attack anyone. When did the developments in Ukraine start? Since the coup d'etat and the hostilities in Donbass began, that's when they started. And we're protecting our people, ourselves, our homeland, and our future. As for religion in general, you know, it's not about external manifestations. It's not about going to church every day or banging your head on the floor.
Dude, preventing anti-Semitism invented by Nazis is insane. It's literally a staple of European culture. Several explosion and instances of institutional discrimination. Even Shakespeare does anti-Semitism in some of his plays. Yeah, no, I know. It's fucking absolute. That, you know what that is? That's moralist Christian copium maxed out, okay? It's like epic Western supremacist copium to be like, oh, anti-Semitism, that's a Muslim thing. It's like, no, dude, it's a Christ cuck thing, okay? It has always been a staple. It's kind of how the religion started to begin with. Like, you know, hating Jewish people and blaming the fucking Jews for all of it. Yeah, the original sin, the killing of Christ. But it is that's a classic. Well, scapegoating with the Nazis is one aspect of it, saying, oh no, it's just a German thing. But beyond that, now they don't even do that. Germans now desperately cling on to the Muslims are actually the real anti-Semites narrative. You know what I mean? Where they're like, oh, no, it's not us, yeah. I mean, we know anti-Semitism, we did it, yeah. But also, think about the Muslims, yeah. They're the ones doing the anti-Semitisms now. It's very bad. Oh, no. Oh, mein Gott, I kann nicht glauben. Not good. The Muslims are so anti-Semitic.
It is in the heart. And our culture is so human-oriented. Dostoevsky, who was very well known in the West and the genius of Russian culture, Russian literature, spoke a lot about this, about the Russian soul.
I think that's the worst part about growing up in Turkey, is that like almost everything you fucking read is Russian lit, and it sucks so much dick. I read Turgenev, I read Dostoevsky, and that shit sucked, okay? Even when I was in like 6th grade, I was like, what the fuck am I reading this? Like, this is such a goddamn bummer, dude. I don't want to fucking read this shit at all. Yo, what the fuck? Turgenev is sick? Yeah, I don't agree, okay? Very depressing. Not interested. No thank you. I'm about to leave this channel. Okay, well, you know, sorry. I'm honest. Okay? I will not apologize for my honesty. Russian motherfuckers, no wonder No wonder there's so much suicide, okay? I don't know how the fuck they do what the fuck they're doing. Hasan, mate, grow up, fuck's sake. Bro, if that's all I read, I get it, okay? Shit is gray, dog. It's gray. It's gray as hell.
After all, Western society is more pragmatic. Russian people think more about the eternal, about moral values. I don't know, maybe you won't agree with me, but Western culture is more pragmatic after all. I'm not saying this is bad. It makes it possible.
Is it worse than German fairy tales? No, German fairy tales are at least like so insanely hyper violent and gruesome that like it's a little bit more interesting. Yeah, German fairy tales are like German fairy tales explain a lot about German culture, okay? But at least it's like content. Classic tropes like literally the mother feeding the son. The naughty boy, mutig, feeding the naughty boy to the father. After a long day of the work, oh, the father comes back. And he says, "Ooh, yummy. Oh, ich möchte more of this. Yeah, it's so good. Is that good? Yeah." Yeah, they love putting kids in the oven. Explains a lot about German culture, okay? I'm just saying. If you're a kid and that's what they're teaching you from the jump.
For today's golden billion to achieve good success in production, even in science and so on.
Cannibalism, straight up, fucked up. I see why Joe. Wait, what? No, straight up, dude. You guys need to look at Brothers Grimm. You guys need to look at Brothers Grimm, but like the OG Brothers Grimm shit. Like not like the watered down version of Hansel and Gretel, but like the OG version. That shit should not be read to children. There is no way you are going to have the same brain chemistry if you're like. I talk about this a lot. When I was younger, I had a wake up moment when I was watching Full Metal Jacket. Okay. I loved it, but there was definitely a moment, especially in the bathroom when he, goes in and he fucking blamos himself. I remember thinking, oh my God, I think I'm definitely too young to be seeing this. Like, I remember watching that, and there was something strange that happened in my brain while watching that where I went, oh my God, I'm pretty sure my life is not going to be the same after I just watched what is going on. I feel like German folk stories are just an endless sequence of that, if that makes sense. Very twisted. Very fucked up. A classic image from a German tale about a boy sucking his thumb. Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, come here, yeah. I will find the thumb. Yeah, anything with dark pagan ruse is like fucked up vibes. 100% is really fucked up.
There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that we kind of look the same. But our minds
So
are
do you
built
see
a
the
little different.
supernatural at work as you
This part's
look out
great.
across what's happening in the world now? Do you see God at work? Do you ever think to yourself, these are forces that are not human?
No, to be honest, I don't.
It's so good. He's like, yeah, right? You love Christianity. God, like, God's helping you out, right? Do you see God everywhere? There are cathedrals everywhere for those with eyes to see, or whatever the fuck that
so.
thing is.
My opinion is that the development of the world community is in accordance with inherent laws, and those laws are what they are. It's always been this way in the history of mankind. Some nations and countries rose, became stronger and more numerous, and then left the international stage, losing the status they had accustomed to. There's probably no need for me to give examples, but we could start with the Genghis Khan and horde conquerors, the Golden Horde, and then end with the Roman Empire. It seems that there has never been anything like the Roman Empire in the history of mankind. Nevertheless, the potential of the barbarians gradually grew, as did their population. In general, the barbarians were getting stronger and begun to develop economically, as we would say today. This eventually led to the collapse of the Roman Empire and the regime imposed by the Romans. However, it took 5 centuries for the Roman Empire to fall apart. The difference with what is happening now is that all the processes of change are happening at a much faster pace than in Roman times.
So when does the AI empire start, do you think?
You're asking increasingly more complicated questions. To answer them, you need to be an expert in big numbers, big data, and AI. Mankind is currently facing many threats. Due to the genetic researches, it is now possible to create a superhuman, a specialized human being. A genetic...
Wait. I'm sorry. I heard what he said. And this is my retort to what he had to say about the golden horde. Yeah, Putin, a lot can be explained if you think Putin is a paradox player. I'm stomping my foot right now. You can't hear it, but... Dude, I don't know what it is. It awakens epigenetic memories, okay? That's it. Tengri bizmenen. Oh, God. Yeah, this is when... Yeah, people say I'm a neo-Ottomanist before they realize, okay, once that Mongolian throat singing comes out, I'm a Panturinist, bitch. I'm like Ottoman who? Talk about the horde. Yeah, I'm not a neo-caliphate guy. I'm a neo-khanate guy, if you know what I'm saying.
Genetically engineered athlete, scientist, military man. There are reports that Elon Musk has already had a chip implanted in the human brain in the USA.
What do you think of that?
Well, I think there's no stopping Elon Musk. He will do as he sees fit. Nevertheless, you need to find some common ground with him, search for ways to persuade him. I think he's a smart person, I truly believe he is. So you need to reach an agreement with him because this process needs to be formalized and subjected to certain rules. Humanity has to consider what is going to happen due to the newest development in genetics or in AI. One can make an approximate prediction of what will happen.
Угрозу своему существованию от ядерного оружия, все начали обладатели ядерного
Once mankind felt an existential threat coming from nuclear weapons, all nuclear nations began to come to terms with one another since they realized the negligent use of nuclear weaponry could drive humanity to extinction.
искусственного интеллекта, либо генетики, либо еще каких-то современных направлений, остановить которые
It
невозможно.
is impossible to stop research in genetics or AI today, just as it was impossible to stop the use of gunpowder back in the day.
Эти исследования все равно будут. Но когда человечество почувствует угрозу для себя,
But as soon as we realize that the threat comes from unbridled and uncontrolled development of AI, or genetics, or any other field, the time will come to reach an international agreement on how to regulate these things.
I appreciate all the time you've given us. I just got to ask you one last question, and that's about someone who's very famous in the United States, probably not here, Evan Gershkovich, who's the Wall Street Journal reporter. He's 32, and he's been in prison for almost a year.
Whoa!
This is a huge story in the United States, and I just want to ask you directly, without getting into the details of it or your version of what happened, if as a sign of your decency, you would be willing to release him to us and we'll bring him back to the United States.
мы столько сделали жестов доброй воли, что, мне кажется, мы исчерпали все лимиты.
We have done so many gestures of goodwill out of decency that I think we have run out of them.
Ни разу не ответил. Но
We have never seen anyone reciprocate to us in a similar manner.
что мы
However, in theory, we can say that we do not rule out that we can do that
не исключаем того, что мы можем это
if our
сделать
partners
при
take reciprocal steps.
встречном движении со стороны наших.
Okay. Okay. I want you to understand something. That's the price of admission. That's how much of a benefit Vladimir Putin sees from this entire thing, where he went on an uninterrupted, heavily fucking watched rant about justifications for why he went in and invaded Ukraine. That if you think for a moment that that was an impromptu question and was not previously arranged, I have a fucking bridge to sell you. Okay? I'm willing to bet that in and of itself, that question is a ballsy ass question. Okay? That is a really fucking ballsy question to ask Vladimir Putin straight to his face, because it's technically supposed to make him look bad. So, I'm fairly certain, because that is a very big ask. He still turned it around, but the fact that he could ask that to, the fact that he could, if you should wait for the next 2 minutes if you think that. No, I'm saying, like, even the fact that he was allowed to ask that question implies, and the reason why he did it is at the end for that reason. But the reason why he was able to ask that question is because, like, I think he finds that to be the rest of the thing is worth it for Vladimir Putin.
When I talk about the partners, I first of all refer to special services.
Представители специальных служб.
Special services are in contact with one another. They are talking about the matter in question.
На то, чтобы не решить это.
There is no taboo to settle this issue.
Готовы ее решать.
We are willing to solve
Есть
it.
определенные условия, которые
But there are certain terms being discussed via special services channels.
партнерским каналам между спецслужбами.
I believe an agreement can be reached.
So typically, I mean, this stuff has happened for obviously centuries. One country catches another spy within its borders, it trades it for one of its own intel guys in another country. I think what makes it, and it's not my business, but what makes this different is the guy's obviously not a spy, he's a kid. And maybe he was breaking your law in some way, but he's not a super spy, and everybody knows that. And he's being held hostage in exchange, which is true. With respect, it's true, and everyone knows it's true. So maybe he's in a different category. Maybe it's not fair to ask for, you know, somebody else in exchange for letting him out. Maybe it degrades Russia to do that.
Вы знаете, ну, можно как угодно говорить, что такое шпион, что не
You
шпион.
know, you can give different interpretations to what constitutes a spy, but there are certain things provided by law. If person gets secret information,
That's crazy. Bro, that's a ballsy ass fucking question. I'm telling you, no. I think the way first of all, Someone in the chat said, oh, you think Vladimir Putin does not allow you to ask questions? You should see one of those like town halls that he does. Dog, I'm not saying that there isn't a charade and like that people don't ask questions of Vladimir Putin. They do, especially contentious ones. I'm simply saying that they are pre-arranged. And if you think that they're not pre-arranged, what's the common meta in Russia? It's like in Russia there's an anti-Putin constituency, or like there are anti-Putin parties, and they're all run by Putin. Like there is no world in which like there are people who are legitimate and genuine in like everything is controlled opposition. Anytime he's addressing a question that some random person is asking, even if it comes across as contentious, it is predetermined. It's allowed. There's an allowance so that it looks like people like you will turn around and go, oh yeah, no, look, he's so open. He's open. He's an open book. People will ask him any question they want. It's so that you feel that way, but it's still controlled. And I think that's what I'm trying to say here is that like, this is a prearranged question and it's a very big one. Okay. That's a very major question. A major question that he was allowed to ask. And that means, in my opinion, that is the price of admission. It shows me the calculation on the Putin side of how important this interview was. Okay. The question being about Gershkovich, the American journalist that's currently locked away in Russian prison.
And does that in conspiratorial manner, then this is qualified as espionage. And that is exactly what he was doing. He was receiving classified, confidential information, and he did it covertly. Maybe he did that out of carelessness or his own initiative. Considering the sheer fact, this is qualified as espionage. The fact has been proven, as he was caught red-handed when he was receiving this information. If it had been some far-fetched excuse, some fabrication, something not proven, it would have been a different story then. But he was caught red-handed when he was secretly getting confidential information.
Look. Look at how cool, calm, and collected he is in his response. By the way, Tucker Carlson's the wrong guy for this, but if this is a real interview, someone could go and turn around and say the exact same thing about, like, Brittany Griner. Tucker obviously won't do it because he's a racist piece of shit. But, like, the notion that Brittany Griner was worthy of a prisoner and not simply a political prisoner used as a tool for doing a swap is ridiculous. And the real counter is something along those lines. But because this is like obviously predetermined and pre-scripted, like what kind of questions Tucker is allowed to ask is pre-scripted. It's obvious that this was an opportunity that was predetermined. And I think it, at least from my perspective, it shows how severely important this interview was for Vladdy Poo.
What is it then?
But are you suggesting he was working for the U.S. government or NATO, or he was just a reporter who was given material he wasn't supposed to have? Those seem like very different things.
This also plays into the legitimacy of the interview, right? Now you're giving your graces. Okay? Now you're literally, first of all, Charlie Rose interviewing Putin. Do you think it was scripted? Not the same. Putin now getting an interview inside of fucking Russia while not offering any interviews to the Western media at all is totally different than Putin doing like an apology tour or Putin doing some kind of like PR tour. He can withstand off the cuff questioning, but this is during war inside of Russian boundaries is not the same dynamic at all. They literally said questions were not discussed. Yeah, dog, of course they said that. That's the whole point of why Tucker is able to ask this question. Because guess what? When Tucker Carlson gets to ask this question, all of a sudden, everyone goes, see, this is a valid interview. Tucker's actually got him on the back foot here. It legitimizes Tucker's position, and therefore it legitimizes all the instances where Tucker Carlson was just like sucking his cock while he was in the middle of talking about how fucking super cool it is that he's like invaded Ukraine and also how every Ukrainian is technically Russian. It is a way to legitimize Tucker's position by allowing a sense of contention in the interview.
Я не знаю, на кого он работал.
I don't know who he was working for, but I would like to reiterate that getting classified information in secret is called espionage, and he was working for the US Special Services, some other agencies. I don't think he was working for Monaco, as Monaco is hardly interested in getting that information. It is up to special services to come to an agreement. Some groundwork has been laid. There are people who, in our view, are not connected with special services. Let me tell you a story about a person serving a sentence in an allied country of the US. That person, due to patriotic sentiments, eliminated a bandit in one of the European capitals. During the events in the Caucasus, do you know what he was doing? I don't want to say that, but I will do it anyway. He was laying our soldiers, taken prisoner, on the road and then drove his car over their heads. What kind of person is that? Can he even be called human? But there was a patriot who eliminated him in one of the European capitals. Whether he did it of his own volition or not, that is a different question.
Yeah, but Evan Gershkovich didn't do that. I mean, that's a completely different. I mean, it's a 32-year-old like newspaper reporter.
He committed something different. He's not just a journalist. I reiterate, he's a journalist who was secretly getting confidential information. Yes, it is different, but still, I'm talking about other people who are essentially controlled by the US authorities, wherever they're serving a sentence. There is an ongoing dialogue between the special services. This has to be resolved in a calm, responsible, and professional manner. They're keeping in touch, so...
He's talking about an FSB operative who murdered a Chechen activist in Berlin a few years ago. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough of the details here. I have no idea what he's talking about.
Let them do their work.
I mean, I do know that it's, I mean, by his own admission, it's not a good comparison anyway. But
I do not rule out that the person you refer to, Mr. Gershkovich, may return to his motherland. By the end of the day, it does not make any sense to keep him in prison in Russia. We want the US Special Services to think about how they can contribute to achieving the goals our special services are pursuing. We are ready to talk. Moreover, the talks are underway. And there have been many successful examples of these talks crowned with success. Probably this is going to be crowned with success as well. But we have to come to an agreement.
I don't know if saying that Tucker is not suitable to debate Putin will help saying Putin is wrong in his points. I mean, Putin is giving detailed information. Why not pick apart his arguments in detail, point by point, and falsify what he says? I have already. I did that yesterday. I went through a lot of the silly historical significance arguments that he made. And I also admitted that there were plenty of instances where he was actually completely correct in his assessment, some of which was exaggerated greatly, but others were correct, especially as it pertains to like American hypocrisy, for example. The problem is when you are currently in the process of invading your neighboring nation, making irredentist, blood and soil arguments as to why you must invade that nation, and then simultaneously talk about it from the framework of like American hypocrisy. Well, it doesn't matter. Like, you're right, but you're the wrong guy to say it because look at what you're fucking doing. Do you understand what I mean? Also, this is not a debate. This is a glaze sesh. This is a suckfest. This is an opportunity for Tucker Carlson more than Vladimir Putin, but Vladimir Putin certainly is gaining a lot from this as well. And that's why I mentioned the part about Tucker Carlson having the allowance to ask him this contentious question about an American prisoner who's being held hostage as a political prisoner in Russia for the crime of not espionage, but instead writing. Okay, doing journalism. Like, it's ridiculous. It's also obviously additionally ironic considering that Edward Snowden lives in Russia, and Russia, as we know, has a very open door policy as it pertains to like letting anyone and everyone get safe harbor from the American government. So that makes it even funnier. But ultimately, yeah, it feels like a way for Putin to broadcast his demands to the U.S. government for a prisoner exchange. Anyway.
Agreement.
I hope you let him out. Mr. President, thank you.
I also want him to return to his homeland at last. I'm absolutely sincere. But let me say once again, the dialogue continues. The more public we render things of this nature, the more difficult it becomes to resolve them. Everything has to be done in calm manner.
I wonder if that's true with the war, though, also. I mean, I want to ask one more question, which is, and maybe you don't want to say so for strategic reasons, but are you worried that what's happening in Ukraine could lead to something much larger and much more horrible? And how motivated are you just to call the U.S. government and say, let's come to terms?
My five-head analysis or my tinfoil hat analysis is Tucker Carlson never stopped being CIA. And there's factions within the State Department that's like trying to get Russia to fucking, finish this. They no longer can support Ukraine. So they're like, come on. Like, pull out, please. You're making things too hard. Obviously, I don't believe that, but...
I already said that we did not refuse to talk. We're willing to negotiate. It is the Western side, and Ukraine is obviously a satellite state of the US. It is evident. I do not want you to take it as if I'm looking for a strong word or an insult, but we both understand what is happening. The financial support, $72 billion was provided. Germany ranks second, then other European countries come. Dozens of billions of US dollars are going to Ukraine. There's a huge influx of weapons. In this case, you should tell the current Ukrainian leadership to stop and come to a negotiating table, rescind this absurd decree. We did not refuse.
Sure, but you already said it. I didn't think you meant it as an insult because you already said correctly, it's been reported that Ukraine was prevented from negotiating a peace settlement by the former British Prime Minister acting on behalf of the Biden administration. So of course they're a satellite. Big countries control small countries. That's not new. And that's why I asked about dealing directly with the Biden administration, which is making these decisions, not President Zelensky of Ukraine.
Well, if the Zelensky administration in Ukraine refused to negotiate, I assume they did it under the instruction from Washington. If Washington believes it to be the wrong decision, let it abandon it. Let it find a delicate excuse so that no one is insulted. Let it come up with a way out. It was not us who made this decision, it was them. So let them go back on it. That is it. However, they made the wrong decision, and now we have to look for a way out of the situation to correct their mistakes. They did it, so let them correct it themselves.
He can also flex because of this is a flex. This part is a flex. Once again, America's involvement in Ukraine, maybe 20 years from now, we will finally make this assessment and recognize it as like not an objectively good thing. Obviously, Russia is the main villain here, but America's involvement in Ukraine will be regarded as devastating for Ukraine 20 years down the line for all of the false promises made to Ukraine specifically, like Western involvement in Ukraine. Right now, you look at it and you're like, well, Ukrainians need weapons to defend themselves, and the Western world is giving it. Okay? And it's a delicate matter because those javelins have definitely helped thwart a lot of the Russian offensive, including making the Russian military look bad, including making sure that the Russian air superiority never actually came into play early on. That would have probably greatly accelerated Russia's Russia's troop movement into the country. Maybe even further territory, expanding beyond the eastern areas that they currently control and have annexed. All of that stuff is, in my opinion, the reasons as to why Ukrainians are stuck between Russia and a hard place. However, I'm not trying to be a Russia head, but if you say that in 20 years the U.S. involvement will be a significant point, why is it not significant right now? What? America never fucking admits that what they're doing is bad. What do you mean? That's the only reason why I'm saying this. I've been called a fucking Vladimir Putin defender for having this position for the past 2 years. Non-stop. That's why I always say, like, history will vindicate me, but it doesn't fucking matter because during the time, people will still shit on me non-fucking stop. I'm talking about, like, an actual assessment. Okay? No, my assessment is this from the jump. It's great because America gets to be on the right side, as in they are siding with those who are being invaded against an invading force. So they are on the right side. They're on the right side. They're on the moral side of this argument. Ukraine has a right to defend itself. This is true. This is 100% true. Okay? However, the United States' interest in the matter is what will end up putting our actions, or end up making our actions look awful in the long run when we look back at it and we're far removed from the immediate consequences of it, or maybe experiencing the secondary consequences of it. If America cared about the interests of Ukrainians and Ukrainian citizens, like if that was genuinely, if America wasn't the major player here in the proxy war against Russia in the Ukrainian invasion, utilizing Ukrainian soldiers as cannon fodder, okay? If that was the case, if they actually wanted to purge Russia, they would be significantly more risky, for example, in their action. Maybe they would have sent tanks ahead of time. Maybe they wouldn't have waited for an increase in Russian military action in the region to start giving heavier weapons. But ultimately, it doesn't matter because Ukraine will inevitably run out of men capable of holding those weapons. Because the goal is not to defend Ukraine. The goal is to prolong the conflict from the American perspective. The goal is to prolong the conflict with the hopes that you can wither away enough of Russia's military, which is ironic because I think that is also a miscalculation. That's a miscalculation on the American side. This is two world powers, one the hegemonic superpower, the other a regional power, making miscalculations and allowing Ukrainians to get fucking absolutely obliterated in the middle of the conflict. Russia miscalculated, thinking that it could very easily dominate Ukraine. It was very obvious that they were not going to be able to from the jump. Impossible, because it is a nation state with 44 million individuals. There's no taking over fucking countries like that anymore, okay? You can't do that. You can either do like soft power, economic imperialism, or that's it. That's the only way you can actually develop solid relationships. Do NATO type shit, maybe. Okay? However, America also miscalculated, I think, thinking that like the sanctions would fuck up Russia, that Russia would not be able to continue this annexation for as long as it has, that the counteroffensive would have been successful. I think that those are all American miscalculations as well. And who suffers? Ukrainians. Those are the people who suffer. Ukraine is no longer 44 million. Ukraine is now what, 34, 36 million? Okay. The people that actually made out very well are defense contractors, NATO generals, NATO in general. Okay? Guys, it has been 4 hours and 18 minutes. Suck my dick. I'm going to wrap up this goddamn video, and then we're going to move on. Stop complaining that it's almost 5 hours, okay? It's been 4 hours and 18 minutes. That does not mean it's 5 hours.
Selves. We support this.
So I just want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding what you're saying. I don't think that I am. I think you're saying you want a negotiated settlement to what's happening in Ukraine.
Правильно. Но мы
Right.
уже добились этого.
And we made it. We prepared a
Большой
huge document in Istanbul that was initialed by the head of the
который
Ukrainian
был
delegation.
фотографирован
He affixed his signature to some of the provisions, not to all of it. He put his signature and then he himself said, "We were ready to sign it and the war would have been over long ago, 18 months ago. However, Prime Minister Johnson came, talked us out of it, and we missed that chance." Well, you missed it, you made a mistake. Let them get back to that, that is all. Why do we have to bother ourselves and correct somebody else's mistakes? I know one can say it is our mistake. It was us who intensified the situation and decided to put an end to the war that started in 2014 in Donbass, as I have already said, by means of weapons. Let me get back to furthering history. I already told you this. We were just discussing it. Let us go back to 1991, when we were promised that NATO would not expand, to 2008, when the doors to NATO opened to the declaration of state sovereignty of Ukraine, declaring Ukraine a neutral state. Let us go back to the fact that NATO and US military bases started to appear on the territory of Ukraine, creating threats to
Yeah, bro, you can't fucking say that, though, because you spent the first 40 minutes being like, Ukraine is actually Russian because, you know, Vladimir the impale dick decided in the 14th century that the sheeps across the fucking Kievan Rus border were actually Russian sheeps or whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? Like, he spent like 45 minutes doing doing paradox memes, only to turn around and be like, yeah, you know, it's really fucked up, this NATO expansionist stuff. Can't believe how much NATO expanded.
to us. Let us go back to coup d'etat in Ukraine in 2014.
No, it is true, but it
It is
doesn't
pointless,
matter.
though, isn't it? We may go back and forth endlessly, but they stopped negotiations. Is it a mistake? Yes. Correct it. We are ready. What else is needed?
Do you think it's too humiliating at this point for NATO to accept Russian control of what was 2 years ago Ukrainian territory?
Я же сказал.
I said let them think how to do it with dignity. There are options if there is a will.
Варианты есть. Но если такое желание.
Up until now, there has been
Why does the first 40 minutes negate his arguments? Why does it not matter what he's saying? What do you mean? It doesn't matter what he's saying for two reasons. One, he invaded Ukraine. Okay, he made NATO stronger. He literally caused 2 additional countries to be able to join NATO, gave them enough confidence and also enough reason in the eyes of the public to no longer have neutrality. That's number one. Number two, it doesn't matter what he's saying because there's 2 different arguments here. The realpolitik argument is what Mersheimer has said time and time again. It's a reasonable assessment. The actions are unreasonable, but the assessment leading up to it is to say that this is a security risk. It's understandable for Russia to genuinely consider NATO to be a problem. Its entire design, its entire purpose was anti-USSR, anti-communist. And now it's being utilized as anti-Russia. This doesn't mean that it's like, this doesn't mean that it is, how do I describe it? This doesn't mean that NATO genuinely is afraid of Russia, okay? Because I think that NATO is a security protection racket. So they just simply use Russia as the reason, but it's a mechanism for dominance. But they use Russia in a very good, they use Russia as the very good villain. You know what I mean? For the Baltic states, especially. The states that are actually the real line of defense. Because, you know, they are the Article 5 states that I suspect America wouldn't care about as much. But unlike the actual other states that they do care about, like France and Germany. So I think that having said that, it is an understandable fear that a regional leader would have and would want to enforce red lines on. But that's not the real, but that's the way to do that is not by fucking invading Ukraine, number one. And number two, he basically admits that he doesn't give a shit about the NATO part of it, but more so about the fact that it's supposed to be Russian. There was a time and place when Vladimir Putin was not as ready to admit this reality. Why do you believe him? Why do I believe Vladimir Putin saying that he thinks Ukraine is Russian? I don't believe Ukraine is Russian. I believe Ukraine is Ukraine. I'm saying I believe Vladimir Putin. This is like believing GWB about the WMDs. No, it's not. This is like if George W. Bush said, I'm invading Iraq because of oil. No, Putin believes Ukraine is Russian. No, I don't think. No, I'm saying Putin is using that as a justification. It's like if George W. Bush went and instead of saying like they have weapons of mass destruction, said, I'm going to Iraq because Iraq has oil. If George W. Bush says that openly, then yeah, I'm going to believe him because that's my assessment too. I think Putin is saying the hyper-nationalistic argument because there is a real interest, at least for him, either for his own personal belief that like Ukraine belongs to Russia, or because he wants to not get outflanked by the ultra-nationalists that he's fearful of on to his right-wing flank that do want to engage in earnest actions in Ukraine. That's it. Ultimately, he invalidated every other claim, which weren't even worthy arguments to invade Ukraine in the first place, by using false historical claims to suggest Ukraine doesn't actually exist to justify imperialism. In order to do so, as he would claim, bring back their rightful land through force. Yeah. Now, that also, in my opinion, fucks up the negotiations, because if you're saying you're bloodthirsty and want it, and that Ukraine is Russian, then you're kind of ruining the argument. I don't know. You're kind of ruining the argument that you will inevitably withdraw and that you want to like institute by force the Minsk protocols, right? Or the 15-point plan. And I think that is, I don't know. I think that that's ultimately, well, obviously I don't agree with it. I don't think it's a good thing at all, but I don't know. I think it makes it, you're actually dumb if you think this isn't a good interview. The interview is going to change the world. No, I do think it's a good interview for Vladimir Putin. I think it makes him look reasonable. They rarely, if at all, talked about his actions in Ukraine. And if you don't do that, and that's the major fucking point here, that's the major point of contention here, and you don't ever talk about that at all, then yeah, he looks very reasonable. He's constantly on the offensive against America. It almost feels like he was just like moved to do a special military operation in Ukraine. He just had no other reason. He wanted to align with America over and over again, and America kept swatting him away. You know? In America, were the belligerent warmongers, and Vladimir Putin was just simply pushed into a corner. He had nothing else that he could do, while simultaneously also offering historical claims to Ukraine. It's crazy. It is, I think that overall, it's a massive W for him. So you're saying that Putin is doing Israel? Yes. I think Putin is doing Israel, and Putin is begging in the beginning for America to treat him like Israel, or at least claiming that historically he always wished America would treat him like Israel. But yeah, ultimately he comes across reasonable once you move beyond the old man talking about like weird historical claims to why Ukraine is Russian, which are bullshit, of course. And you wouldn't even think that he is currently invading its neighboring country. If you come into this uninitiated, not really paying attention to what the fuck's going on, you're looking at this as like, well, here's a regional leader that comes across very sane, much more sane than Joe Biden, I would say. You know what I mean? Like, you do not leave this interview thinking like, yeah, this is a fucking massive failure of an invasion of a neighboring nation that has been incredibly costly as far as human lives and as far as like destruction of infrastructure. And now it's like, now it's in a death grip for inches of territory with back and forth. You would not think that at all. Things look fucking cheery. You know?
Be in the uproar and screaming about inflicting a strategic defeat on Russia on the battlefield. Now they are apparently coming to realize that it is difficult to achieve, if possible at all. In my opinion, it is impossible by definition. It is never going to happen. It seems to me that now, those who are in power in the West have come to realize this as well. If so, if the realization has set in, they have to think what to do next. We are ready for this dialogue.
Would you be willing to say, congratulations, NATO, you won, and just keep the situation where it is now?
You know, it is a subject matter for the negotiations. No one is willing to conduct, or, to put it more accurately, they are willing, but do not know how to do it. I know they want to. It is not just I see it, but I know they do want it. But they're struggling to understand how to do it. They have driven the situation to the point where we are at. It is not us who have done that. It is our partners, opponents who have done that. Well, now let them think how to reverse the situation. We're not against it. It would be funny if it were not so sad. This endless mobilization in Ukraine, the hysteria, the domestic problems, sooner or later it will result in agreement. You know, this probably sounds strange given the current situation. But the relations between the two peoples will be rebuilt anyway. It will take a lot of time, but they will heal. I'll give you very unusual examples. There is a combat encounter on the battlefield. Here's a specific example. Ukrainian soldiers got encircled. This is an example from real life. Our soldiers were shouting to them, "There is no chance. Surrender yourselves. Come out and you will be alive." Suddenly, the Ukrainian soldiers were screaming from there in Russian, perfect Russian, saying, "Russians, do not surrender." And all of them perished. They still identify themselves as Russian. What is happening is, to a certain extent, an element of a civil war. Everyone in the West thinks that the Russian people have been split by hostilities forever. No, they will be reunited. The unity is still there. Why are the Ukrainian authorities dismantling the Ukrainian Orthodox Church?
Bro, I don't think, like, I don't know. I think that's bullshit. Like, I get, in the most charitable, I can't believe I'm saying this, in the most charitable way, if I'm going to be as charitable as possible to Vladimir fucking Putin of all people, I think the argument here is that, like, Ukrainians also see themselves as one people. Ukrainians and Russians are one people. Everybody sees themselves as one people, one nation, under God, indivisible, fucking Orthodox Christianity. I don't think that's the case. It's not. And it especially is not, because if that was the case, I feel like the rest of Ukraine would look like Crimea. Like, he literally said it's a civil war. Like, that's not a civil war. That's a whole ass different country. Sure, same language, same lettering. Don't get mad at me, Ukrainians and Ukrainian flag in the bio guys. I'm saying as a dumbass American, it's like virtually impossible for me to decipher. Okay? I know. Everybody says not the same. I know. Okay? But this is why there is a major distinction from where I'm standing within because Cyrillic, yeah. That's why I always distinguish between Crimea and like the rest of Ukraine. Both in terms of the annexation, how the annexation happened, what the retaliation was from Ukraine. That there's a difference. In case you're like, oh no, these guys are all like, this is one nation. This is this is one nation and this is a civil war while you are currently invading the borders of a different sovereign nation. And the irony is that while you said the Ukrainians that live next to the Russian border can consider themselves Russians and he uses them as an example for the entire country. Yeah, except since the invasion, it's over. Because there are still plenty of people who did not consider themselves that. And beyond that, why would anybody fucking be like, oh, thank God Russia came in and blew our shit up?
Because it brings together not only the territory, it brings together our souls. No one will be able to separate the soul. Shall we end here, or is there anything else?
No, I think that's great.
Спасибо.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah, no shot, dude. That was a long ass fucking interview. Goddamn. I don't even have time to fucking shit on the anti-working out leftist, dude. Yeah, I saw